First up, I'd just like to say, whoa, 500 people. I remember the days, and I'm getting old now, so I can say these kind of things. I remember the days when we used to struggle to get a quorum to get our AGM together. In fact, I remember going out on the street and grabbing someone to come and do a vote so we got the quorum. Now you get 500 people along to these software cluster events. Fantastic. So there is some interest in software in this part of the world. And the panel and I are going to work out how to take that interest and turn it into more software heroes. I'm not sure we'll come up with the answers, but we'll come up with some views around that. So, first up, definition. My definition of software hero probably doesn't meet with the software cluster's view of it, but my definition is it's anyone who's put some software together, or an organisation that's put some software together that's making a global impact. It's got to be cool, in terms of, it's got to be picked up by globally, but also it's got to make fistfuls of dollars. And that's my view of what it is, and for the purpose of this discussion. If you've got varying views, that's fine with me. So, in order to help me with this, I've got an eclectic bunch of people here. Some you may recognise, some you may not. So, what I'm going to do is we're going to have about 15 minutes of discussion after these guys have spent 30 to 60 seconds introducing themselves. And 15 minutes of discussion. We'll have 10 minutes of Q&A. However, I say that one of the panel asked me what the tone of this should be. And the tone I think should be, I said, anarchic dissension. So, if you don't want us to go that way and you want us to you want to yell out from the back and butt in, we're happy with that. We'll go with that, within reason. You must be polite, but within reason we'll go with anarchy. So, we're going to introduce the guys first. First up, it's someone who you may recognise. He's a keynote speaker that you may have seen recently. He's CEO of the newly listed Wynyard Group. He's also an ex-Coke dealer. And he's going to tell you, I guess, what I'd rather you did, Craig, is tell us what your thoughts are on software heroes and things like that. Because I think you've introduced yourself enough.
Okay. This is the fake one, is it? Is it right? Okay. Well, there's probably no real change to the theme, but making money is nice, essential, I guess. I think really the challenge is it's got to be different, not just interesting. And again, not sort of talking about, but and I'm not a software person, by the way, so I don't have a technical background. I can sort of basically code some stuff. But what took me a while to get my head around in the software industry was the level of art that it takes to build this stuff, to imagine it, and to make it actual reality. And I think what sort of really astounds me within our company is every time we throw a problem our team's way is the different ways they think of solving it. And so definitely the software hero component is about making money. It's got to be a compelling business proposition. It's got to be, I think, solving some really important problems for customers and hopefully for the world. But actually the cool stuff is when you get behind it, and it's a simplicity at the front end, but the complexity that's solved at the back end is really interesting for me. So.
Okay, cool, good. Money doesn't matter to Craig.
Money matters to my investors a lot, so don't say that.
We got Sam next. It's not the order I've got my cards in, but Sam's a university student. In my days at university, I'd have been terrified to sit in front of 500 people. Are you terrified?
No.
Okay, good. I don't know much about Sam. We met in the hall earlier. It struck me when I saw he's president of this and committee member of that I wasted a lot of time at university drinking beer. And he does much better things with his time there. But I'll let him talk about himself a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm Sam Jarman. I'm a third-year computer science student at UC. I run a club on campus called the Computer Society, CompSoc for short. It's got about 250 members. We do social events, industry events, and academic events. And that takes up a lot of my time. In my spare time, I'm a software engineer at Telligis, working on Telligis Fleet.
So he also works as well as being a student. So I'm going to just ask you one question. What do you reckon we could do as an industry to help you get into there and become a software hero?
So one of my jobs in ComSoc last year and this year is kind of bridging that gap between industry and student bodies. And you hear these days, like everyone like Mark Zuckerberg is saying, oh, we're looking for talented people, we just can't find them. Yet a whole lot of graduates are graduating every year and they can't find jobs. So there's obviously a disconnect between what we're taught at university and what's actually used in industry. For example, we've got about 80 people graduating from Canterbury in a few weeks' time. None of us know Ruby on Rails. None of us know iOS. None of us know Android development. Yet that's what we've been hearing about all day in the technical stream. None of us know how to use Redis or AWS or EC2. So help us. Come to university. Teach us this sort of stuff. We get taught fundamental stuff in university. Come teach us what's new, what's trendy, the applications of that sort of foundational stuff.
Great, great. He also sounds unemployable, doesn't he?
I'm not.
Perhaps you could pass that along.
I've got one myself. I'm Ben Keeps. So in terms of your definition of software heroes, I'd kind of like to add something to it. I spend a lot of time up in the Bay Area, obviously, and frankly, technical term, there's a lot of assholes in this industry. So I'd like to think that a software hero, by our definition, hopefully we can agree on, is someone that, yes, makes money, yes, has global success, but does so in a way that's kind of in keeping with that Kiwi ethos, that we can do it while being good buggers. And maybe we can get there.
That's a really good segue into something I wanted to ask, actually, because I agree with it. Despite my flippant comment earlier, I agree with that. And one of the things I was going to ask Hal, who's sitting here, so I might as well just move across to Hal, as an American, and perhaps Candace can actually add to this as well.
Americans.
I hear I hear from NZT and people like that we need to become more like the Americans in the way we do business and things like that.
God forbid.
And I actually agree with that comment too. So I just wondered what your view is on should we change or should we be Kiwi the way we do things? He said with an English accent.
You know, America is 330 million people. I had to laugh. I got on the plane Thursday morning to go to Honolulu, and the headline of the San Francisco Chronicle was "America wins" in 48-point type with a picture of Ben Ainsley and Jimmy Spittle. I mean, you know, so you know, it's a you know, and I said in my talk a little bit about L.A. It's it's so many different places. There's some great San Franciscans. There's some great New Yorkers. I mean, there are some great people. I don't know. In fact, probably the best Americans have migrated to Asia, Pacific, Australia, New Zealand, I think. But I think the issue for New Zealand is there's not a market here, and that's the real problem. And you have to go find markets, and that tyranny of distance is surmountable these days because of the ability to connect with the rest of the world and not necessarily have to be there for every little thing. And so I think the issue isn't where you're from or who you are, it's how you act, as was said earlier. And I think there's a lot of great people doing some great things. And I think what I see here in New Zealand is there's some it's not just individuals who are heroes, it's teams of people who are heroes, so it's not just one person. And it takes a village, and there's great villages here popping up to doing great things.
Great answer, I reckon. One of the things I was going to say about Hal is I listened to his talk earlier, and I've decided he's 744 years old, judging by the amount of things he's done in his life. So there's another guy who totally impressed me. Candace is last but not least, and Candace Kinzer is CEO of NZ Tech, which is an industry body here, and I'm sure she'll tell you a little bit about that. Another American, but resident here as well, and she's been involved in startups as well as the industry she's in now. So, Candace.
Sure. Well, thank you. So I've lived here now for 16 years, so I moved here when I was 10. Actually shortly after university, and I feel like I've grown up in New Zealand. I mean, my very first job was as a data entry clerk working part-time, and then very quickly over a number of years was given so many opportunities here that I honestly never would have had probably in any other country. And so my heart is very much a New Zealander as well as an American, and I try to translate when I'm given the opportunity. So NZ Tech, or the newly renamed New Zealand Technology Industry Association, was NZICT, which was founded 5 years ago. And I've had the opportunity to look after this organization. I say look after it because I don't know if you necessarily lead it, but you sort of try to guide some of the principles and some of the characters that come through the doors, and the doors that I have to go through. And with the firm belief over the past 18 months that I've been heavily involved with it, that we have to build and execute on a strategy that enables businesses to get offshore and to do it well, and to do it in a way that creates the least amount of heartache and heartbreak through that process. Prior to coming into this role, I was asked to head up a startup back in 2006 called BioMatters. I wasn't a founder necessarily, but the minute that they got funding from the Ice Angels and through the Ice House, Daniel Batten and Lexi Drummond quickly rang me and said, you know, we're a scientist and developer. We don't know jack about business. Can you come and help us out here? We did, and did that for a number of years. And through that process, launched offices in San Francisco and New Jersey, went to Europe, went to Asia. And through that process, as I'm sure many of you entrepreneurs may be able to empathize or recognize, I learned a lot about myself and about life. My husband and I broke up. I mean, I wasn't even in the same country for more than 6 months out of the year. And it was a very emotional transition to go through. And so when I talk to entrepreneurs who are saying, yeah, we're ready to go offshore and set up in San Francisco, it's almost a therapy session as well. It's like, are you sure you're ready to do this? And are you sure you've got this support? So to be the hero, I think, is what I've learned. It's not necessarily the superhero that surpasses everybody along the way and comes out on top. But to me, a real hero is somebody who can actually support everyone around them to be the best that they can be, and to help rescue them in times of need. But also when you're leading a team, or you're leading an industry association or a company or a family or whatever it is that you find yourself remotely in charge of, the real hero is the person that actually ensures that everyone around them is taken care of as well.
Great, cool, thank you.
Thank you.
I've got a few questions that I'll just throw out there, and you guys can pick them up as you want to. Throw the mic around. I guess the key one that troubles me always is, what is the biggest thing stopping us growing lots of vineyards or lots of Orion Healths or whatever? What do you think is the biggest thing out there that's stopping us at the moment? I reckon it's capital, by the way, but is anyone got
I've got one opinion on this. So basically, when a young person like me is learning how to program, our ideas and our visions are capped. They're kind of held in by what we actually know at the time. And the good thing is, when you've got like a really crazy partner, or like a really crazy business partner that thinks outside the box, thinks, oh, it's capable, and actually challenges you to actually learn the stuff needed to write it. So it's more about just having confidence in your own abilities to actually think outside of what we can do. Like Rod Drury probably didn't know how to code up the whole of Xero by himself, but he became Nick Fury and got a team of heroes together and actually did it. So yeah, don't be limited by what you know. It's even better to get someone non-technical who doesn't actually have a decent knowledge of the technical side, so they don't actually have a limit like that.
I think,
Thank you.
yeah, I agree, and I think more broadly than tech skills particularly, it's about perspective. And one thing we lack, you know, it's amazing we live in the most beautiful country in the world and it's fantastic and yada, yada, yada. That's all great. But we're a long way from anywhere and we don't get to see a lot of this stuff happening. And, you know, the great thing about SLI and Wynyard and Xero and all these successes, that all of a sudden people are realising that, yeah, it takes this and it takes that and it takes the other thing, and you plug these component bits together and you can build a business out of it. So I think the thing that we lack, if you compare us with Australia, and Australia has a more vibrant ecosystem there, is that they've just got more perspective. They're more outwardly looking. We tend to focus a little bit on the DIY. We can do it. We can stay here. And there's nothing inherently wrong with the 3Bs, with being happy to get our batch, our BMW and our boat. You know, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Yes, we do need to think bigger to an extent, but as I say, we can do it in our own way. We don't need to become the Silicon Valley of New Zealand, or the Silicon Valley of APAC.
One of the things that I get asked a lot going over to the U.S., and I take a lot of Kiwi companies into Silicon Valley, is some of the VCs will pull me aside and kind of ask a few questions about what is the size of New Zealand actually. So I did a little bit of research, and we have the same population or near the same population and close to the same GDP as Denver, Colorado. In the United States, and they kind of look at me like, oh my Lord, seriously? And I said, yes, we're smaller than San Diego, but just slightly larger than Denver, Colorado. And I think when you kind of get your head around it, being from the US or being a global citizen, that how much we are actually doing with, the resources that we have, and the resources being people and money and ideas, it far outweighs anything else that we could really hope for. And I think again, it's keeping that in perspective and keeping positive about it. And in terms of actual constraints, we're not the only ones that are constrained by capital. However, a greater percentage of our startups get funded than those that get funded in Silicon Valley by far, in terms of sheer numbers. And I think the biggest constraint we have at the moment is the skills and talent and the wherewithal to actually get things stood up quickly and get them offshore quickly. I think we've got the ideas and we can get the funding if we need it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just going to add real quickly. I don't think it's capital. I think it's building qualified teams to achieve the objectives within the time frames.
I actually think it's just confidence, to be honest. I think there's, without going through the capital structures, but God knows how many people we spoke to, there was plenty of options to raise capital, most of it not here, but it didn't stop us doing it. But I think it's really just confidence. A number of times I've sat in meetings with investors and we've walked in thinking we had a really ambitious sales target, and they say, oh, that's really interesting, but come back and talk to us when you're thinking about 10 times that. And we'll back your company. And I think the reality is, quietly, we all thought we could do much more than we presented, but there's this lack of confidence generally in terms of presenting our story and our ambition and aspirations.
So all of you have said the same thing essentially there. How do we get more confidence then? How do we do that?
Well, I think we are, to be honest. I think what's changed in the last maybe 24 months, Rod's on a great run. It's given investors are now listening. I'll probably regret saying this, there's very few analysts in the funds here at the moment that actually understand the tech sector, but they're now doing the work because they're scared they're going to miss out. And, it's really good what Rod's done to the super funds and that here is he's made them scared of missing out. So the analysts are now doing the work. They've now got the benchmarks from overseas. They're looking at what are the value of tech companies and where do I get on the bandwagon, because as soon as Xero got indexed, that changes a whole hell of a lot of behaviour in the fund. So I think it is happening, and I think it's happening fast.
Yeah, I think it's important not to gild the lily though, because unfortunately, those analysts realise they missed out on Xero, and so they're jumping in on everything. And Brian Gaynor was put in a bunch of money into Vend, not necessarily because it was a good idea, and I think Vend is a good idea, but because he was scared of missing out. So I think that there is a real lack of maturity in the understanding of the space here, and it's something we all need to work on. And I think a problem we have in the country is that we do tend to put 2 or 3 people or organisations on pedestals, and with the utmost respect to the Trade Me and Xero mafia, it takes a lot more than that. So I think what it's going to take is you guys and Sean and Orion starting to make some more noise about what they're doing, and showing that there is actually a vibrancy beyond just Xero and just Trade Me.
Great, cool.
I first came here 16 years ago, as you, when I was 726, and I think there's been enormous change. I don't think you're seeing it. I'm in and out of here quite a bit. And New Zealanders, when I first came here, 80% of New Zealanders have passports. Only 22% of Americans had passports. You just don't have that. I would say that to Kiwis, and they go, "You're kidding." No. I said, yeah, that's like 300 million people, or 280 million people didn't have passports 16 years ago in the United States. So, you just have to, really have a perspective, and I think you're getting so much more. So many companies are happening. 5 years from now, you look back and go, wow, look what we did. And it's like Marshall McLuhan once said, we're not sure who discovered water, but we're certain there wasn't a fish. And you don't see it when you're in it.
Yeah, maybe if I just write a response. Just to sort of clarify, the thing that I think has changed, and I guess we've been quite close to it for the last 12 months, is when you get funds like Milford and you get the analysts that are working for funds like Milford, spending the time with companies like ours, like the Xeros and like those companies that are coming forward, that has got to be beneficial for informing local investors, high net wealth, because they're not just, there's not a huge volume of companies at the moment they have choices for, and therefore they can't afford to get something wrong, and so they spend the time understanding the markets. And so what I'm saying at the moment is really encouraging, is the more of the funds that do the work, even if they're not going to invest, the better informed we get as CEOs around what we have to do to be successful to raise money, the better informed the markets are, and I think the better informed the retail investors are. So increasingly we're getting retail investors are looking, actually, I can afford to put 5% in my portfolio, or when Johnny comes home and says, I've got this great idea, Dad, to build a company, I'll put a bit of my money into it. So I think that's the real thing that's possibly changing a bit.
To counter your counter, I'd agree with that if yesterday Punakaiki hadn't fallen flat. And that was really, and regardless of whether you think Punakaiki is a good thing or not, that was really disappointing, because where is that robust ecosystem when they can't even raise $5 million?
I was going to ask you about that, so I'm glad you brought it up. So I'm going to change tack slightly. What do you think on exits? I got quite a bit of grief when we exited. It was kind of like build up a company, sell it off to the Yanks, and what are you doing? You're selling the crown jewels. Do people have a view on whether or not we need to build these $100 million, billion-dollar companies or whatever, or can we build up small companies, sell them off, and reinvest the money back into this country?
You want me to go? I think
They're fighting to
absolutely.
answer.
No. I just I think it's just in terms of backing up just a little bit, in terms of the confidence thing, and it ties into this really well, is I think a lot New Zealanders are so good at winning. They're so good at making a success story where there wasn't one, and I think it's kind of an intimidating thing to go out and have a greater risk of failure when you start out on a venture than of success. And I think that's one of the big things that holds the companies and people back, and I think it translates into the exit strategy as well, is that there's this expectation that once you do grow something that is quite special, then you're never meant to let go of it. You're always meant to hold on to it and find your way through the woods no matter what. And one of the thoughts that I've had in the past is around the capability for New Zealand to be this forestry, like a nursery for high potential companies in very niche areas, being able to grow them up to a certain level, turn around, sell them, come back, do it again, and do it over and over again. And the appetite for investors overseas, from China, from the United States, even from Korea, we're seeing it with Samsung, to start investing in some of the innovation in New Zealand is amazing. I mean, I was in the U.S. with Peter Crisp, and he was telling me, look, we've got all these VCs that want to invest in stuff in New Zealand. We just don't have enough opportunities for them to actually get stuck into. So in that respect, I think that, yes, if we can kind of change our mindset into almost becoming a conveyor belt of brilliant ideas that get to a certain stage and then selling them off and doing it over and over and over again, we would carve out such a niche space in the tech market and become such a phenomenally wealthy country for doing that, and breed that innovation and be the place where people want to come, in my opinion.
Could I just give a partial U.S. other perspective? I think one of the things that's missing here in terms of the ecosystem is bigger companies to acquire smaller companies, and so there aren't enough companies who can acquire those companies and grow through acquisition here and build vertical sectors in a better way. That's one thing. Number two, I think there's not enough companies here who really understand
Cloud aspect of things, and whether that's a help for us in terms of creating software heroes?
It's just water vapor, really. The only thing I'd say in terms of the exit thing is that I don't think, in keeping with this Kiwi way, I don't think it should be so binary for us. I think we should be looking to build profitable keepers that keep churning things through and keep employing people. The fact is that there's this kind of myth of serial entrepreneurship, which doesn't actually happen. I mean, if you look at the Trade Me Mafia, okay, there have been some, Sam has done a few, but given, and all respect to Sam, he's a fantastic guy, and I'm sure he's not in the room, but, and I'm sure he doesn't care anyway what I say, but, the fact of the matter is that an equivalent exit in the US would have gone on to do a hell of a lot more in terms of serial entrepreneurship. So I'm kind of fearful that if we do this sort of regular exit conveyor belt, that we won't quite get the flow through that we think we will, because people are quite happy to kick back. And so, if I look at the stuff I do, I've got a manufacturing business that I've owned for 20 years and will own probably for the rest of my life. And I've also invested in a bunch of tech businesses, one that exited after 12 months. I think that's kind of the diversity that, on a macro level, we want to encourage here.
Cool, thank you. I think this thing here says I've got 4 minutes, 21 seconds, 18 seconds left. Is that correct? So I'd like to know if there are any questions from the audience that you'd like to pose to these guys around creating software heroes, or something else, I guess. Otherwise, you get my questions. Someone over here. I don't know if we can do a mic to you, but because we've got them all here.
It's been mentioned of talking about smaller companies, so not the big ones like Travi or Xero, but the smaller companies making more noise and generally making it clearer that there is a sort of startup or tech centre around Christchurch. What sort of ideas do you have to help promote that sort of noise and dialogue?
I think I made that comment, did I? Right, that's okay.
You better comment on it.
Did everyone hear the question? I guess I made a comment around, there's not I think there could be more investment in terms of making sure that, the Christchurch sector and its momentum that it's got is better represented and marketed to the rest of the world. I mean, this is a New Zealand problem, not just a Christchurch problem. I constantly read, and I'm a New Zealand citizen too, by the way, Australian origin, but New Zealand citizen, so I can say this now. We constantly kind of read about we're a really innovative country. There's actually not many places you go in the world that when you say you're from New Zealand, they go, oh, there's that innovative country. It just doesn't happen that way, because the reality is there's lots of innovative places around the world, but there is a unique opportunity here for us to market the country. I think some of the work that's been done around Brand NZ to get away from this, pure NZ thing has got to be positive. But hearing Christchurch and Canterbury, there's really a unique opportunity over the next couple of years to reposition this city as a real powerhouse. And it just needs a conscious effort and some effort to go behind that, because no other city can do it in New Zealand. Auckland doesn't really care less and is too fragmented. I guess Wellington's got a sector there, but there's an opportunity for this city to become, the startup city in New Zealand, and then to leverage off some of the work that's been done in repositioning New Zealand. So to me, it's a marketing campaign, and it's got to be money spent on it, but it's got to be smart around the way that it's executed globally, so that people don't necessarily want to come here, but they do want to invest here, and they do want to back the companies that come out of here. So
I'm guessing that the software cluster's got a part to play in that for Christchurch. They seem to have gathered a lot of people together, so why not harness that? Candice?
No, I've just got him. Right, yes.
Candice doesn't want to say. Any more questions
Happy
from
to
anyone?
talk about it.
You're dying for a drink.
Yeah, I think I've got the mic, so I'll beat you all. I'm particularly interested. I mean, there's a lot of talk about startups here, and there's a lot of interest that I also in the exit strategies you've got going there. How do you guys think the best way to keep the innovation and the excitement that exists in a startup company, how do you keep that going?
From start to finish, you mean? So basically, that from the employees, you mean, or the founders, or?
Let's say you don't have an exit strategy. Let's say you want to keep that innovation, the excitement, the fun, the unbridled fun you have in that first 6 months to a year of a startup company. How do you keep that going? And going and going.
Yeah, exactly. I think in terms of the solving the real problem issue, and that Ben just mentioned, and what Craig talks about, the one of the companies that in Silicon Valley that's been going for a number of years now, that their motto is where the hardest interview in the valley is Palantir, who do some similar. Yeah, exactly. Work, but that as a company, they're privately owned. They don't really have an exit strategy per se. They've been around for about 6 or 7 years now as well. Yeah, just raised $300 million this week. And the way that they, that in the work that I've done with them in the past, the way that they excite their staff is to constantly bring through projects, that mean a lot to them. And they find people that are extremely passionate about what they're doing. In the company that I ran for a while, we did DNA sequence analysis software. And I was at pains, I had to find developers that had PhDs in bioinformatics and cheminformatics. They're not really falling off trees in New Zealand. And when you bring them into an environment and to motivate them, we didn't have the money to, issue shares. But what we did do was find what really floated their boat, and that was actually giving them the opportunity to create and solve and be the rainmaker, in their own special area. And, that to me, I think, is what any business at any part of its life cycle should be doing for its staff, not just startups.
Just quick comment. You have to really be conscious about building corporate culture as you build people, and and infuse those people with the corporate cultural values, lifestyle concepts. All of that, I think, is part of it. It's very difficult to do, but much easier to do here. You're seeing companies in the U.S. where they raise, $500, $600 million, and they have to, acquire 30 companies and integrate it 2,000, 3,000, 10,000 people at one point in time, and you just don't see that scale here. So I think it's easier to be much more conscious about doing it, in a professional, growth way.
Last comment from it, and then I'm being wound up behind.
Okay, so what you're talking about is like the startup feel, right? So the startup feel comes from a group of people working together to solve a problem. You start to lose that after the problem's solved and your company is just a steam train with momentum. What some companies are doing, growing quite fast, and they're hiring graduates, but people sometimes misinterpret graduates. We're not just code drones. We have ideas of our own. Google gives their employees 20% of their time to come up with something new, and that's how Gmail came up. They used to, but yeah, Eric Schmidt. But the companies are doing that, sort of like asking their employees what the problems are they want to solve and whether or not it's in line with their existing customers and their interests. So it's just keep innovating internally. That's pretty much the solution to that.
I'm afraid on that note, and it's a good note, we're going to wrap up the session and let you get even closer towards drinks. I'd like to thank all of the panel members here. It wasn't really anarchic dissension, but there was a bit of a love-in going in there a bit, I think, really. So, no, thank you very much, guys, and a round of applause for these guys.